Thanks so much for taking out the time on a Sunday evening. And we have Krishna here, ready with a fantastic piece of content on fintech. I've personally had a chance to go through the deck, and let me tell you, I'm very excited about the contents of it, and I'm pretty sure you'd love it. A very quick introduction about Krishna, and then a little bit about Menzi as well. So Uh, Krishna has been in fintech for close to a decade now, and he's been in product management for a little over that, and he's built products for companies like Aditya Birla, where he's been the backbone of all things fintech, and then he's built the similar kind of product size and scale at Flipkart, where he was again building the backbone, and I'll let him speak more about what he's been doing at Flipkart. And then recently he's moved to HDFC, and where he's building the new fintech platform, the full technology platform for HDFC Bank. That's going to dramatically change how we use HDFC as a bank. And I'll again let Krishna speak more about it. Before we jump out of the session, one quick line about what is Menzi and what are we doing at Menzi. So Menzi is a mentoring platform. We do one-to-one mentoring sessions, and it's a mobile app. We already have an Android app. Uh, so you folks can experienced folks can join as mentors. Folks can also join as mentees, and find senior folks like Krishna, who are helping people out as mentors. And it's more of an async mentoring, so there is no need to sort of carve out a separate sort of time for getting on a mentoring session. You can message the mentor, and they can message you right back. So it's more on those lines, but you should definitely give it a try, and let me know your thoughts. What do you think about it? Um,
Sure.
yeah, that's a quick introduction. Krishna, over to you.
Hi. Thanks a lot. Good evening, folks. Like how Gaurav was saying, the whole reason for doing this particular thing was just to just to see how we can give back to what we learned over the course of the last 10 years, 15 years, whatever it is, both in terms of financial services as well as in terms of technology, in terms of product management, so on and so forth. I've been fortunate enough to work with some really good folks across these areas. And what we're trying to do, and what Gaurav is trying to do through Menzi, is more about how can that get translated into actual impact, right, for a particular person. And this particular bit which I wanted to put out, I think one slide of this is something which I had presented ages ago when I was working in Flipkart. But this is more of my passion area, where and I'll come to that why it is. Okay, so I've been in financial services for a very long time, more than I think some 15 years now. I started with sales, in the sense not the online glamorous sales, the offline sales, sitting on the back of a moped and going and doing selling mutual funds and insurance and God knows what else, right? That is where I learned everything about financial services. And then I built a platform called Mindverse, which was very honestly too ahead of its time. It under the Aditya Birla Group, under the Aditya Birla Group's whole patronage, but this was basically Mint.com. If any of you remember Mint.com, it's still there in the US. Mint.com plus, right? That was the whole thought process of what we wanted to build. I headed a digital broking platform for some time in Aditya Birla Money. Jumped to Flipkart, worked in consumer lending and commercial lending. Created the Flipkart's, I think, a really good IP in terms of the Flipkart's risk model and affordability models and all that stuff, which allow us to give loans to the underserved customers. And then I've just started my journey with HDFC Bank a couple of months ago. All I'm trying to do. Hey, can you hear me? I'm seeing a thingy here. Okay. A couple of months ago, I joined HDFC Bank. They have a new initiative called Digital Factory. What they are trying to do is that they are basically trying to figure out how can we give the best customer experiences and the best infrastructure to the bank's million offerings. And we are working on a couple of them. We're not working on all of them at one point. We are working on a couple of them. So that's a little bit about myself. Can I get a very, very quick estimate of who my audience is? Is it possible, or is that something which we should do at the end? Or my request is this. This session is going to be, has to be a completely two-way this thing. The presentation, if you look at it, it doesn't have the readable content. It is something which I can explain, and then you can jump back in. My request is this, right? When you ask me a question, just tell me what you do in terms of you're a product manager, designer, you're an engineer, you're a business guy, from which place. That's it. That's all would really help and set some context to me, right? So before I get started, let me just give you a little bit of a small disclaimer. If any of you are, this session, the way I planned it and the way I thought about it is more from perspective of in fintech, but understanding of financial services, how it works. That bridge is what I wanted to close, right? But if any of you are from financial services, have been in financial services for quite some time, know a particular area in out and center, then probably welcome here. But I will be redirecting my questions to you. There is a lot more to learn from you rather than you learn from me. So with that said, let me see if I can put up the presentation up front. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, it's beaming up.
Okay. Okay, brilliant. So this is basically an attempt to demystify one central question, right? Yes, I'm building a beautiful fintech. Yes, I am attracting a ton of customers. Yes, there is a lot of growth. Yes, there is a lot of retention. All that is beautiful, right? I don't know if you guys have noticed, but this whole thing of IPO is happening all around you, right? And my belief, again, this is my personal belief, is that the question which will be asked to every single fintech very soon, and it's not very far away, it's very soon, is that how will you make money, and how will you keep making money, right? And why will you be the only one to keep making money, right? So that questions have started flowing in boardrooms and in this thing. It will start percolating down to the business guys, percolating down to the product guys, percolating down to the engineering folks, percolating down everywhere, right? So at a very high level, this is an attempt to answer that particular question, right? So why are we here on a Sunday evening? So I don't know how many of you are product managers and how many of you are engineering folks, but you would see that usually product managers, engineering folks change between between different domains. They go from food tech to edutech to fintech, so on and so forth. But fintech demands a little bit more domain expertise than any other domain. This is my experience, especially from product managers. And why is it so? Because there is a ton of nuances in finance. There is a regulatory nuance. There is an understanding of the market. There is an understanding of the entire distribution system. There is an understanding of the P&L. There is an understanding of margins and so on and so forth. And the other thing is, financial services has been one of the oldest businesses to exist with technology for quite some time. It was 1980 when the first Indian net banking was started. I don't know if any of you would believe that, but just Google that later. But that was when it was not the internet banking of today, but internet-based transactions started happening then, right? So the point is, it's been around for quite some time. So people know what they're talking about in a lot more depth, and it's purely because of the age, right? Age of that particular industry. And this entire deck which we are talking about, it should be a first step to understanding the domain, right? What are the different fintech models and what moats can we build around each other? Okay, great. Guys, as I said, please stop me, vocalize. I can't see the screen. I can't see the, I can't see the questions which are put on the side. I can probably, take up the questions. I can pause in between and go back to the screen and take questions. But if you have a question, vocalize immediately, because that would that will help us have a conversation instead of just one-way presentation. Yeah.
So Kirti, what I've requested everyone is to post the questions on the chat, and as and when there are we were switching between slides, I might just pause you for a few questions.
Sure, sounds good. Right. So I have divided that into just three businesses for the sake of simplicity. Obviously, it can be divided into a beautiful tree of like 1,000 different businesses. But if you look at typical businesses, there is lending, there is investments, and there is insurance, right? Lending happens to have like secured lending and unsecured lending. Basically, if you have a collateral in the sense, if you're putting down something and then saying, hey, you know what, if I don't pay you back, this something is yours, that's your secured lending, right? And unsecured is basically they're giving you a loan basis your profile rather than anything else. Similarly, in investments, there is debt, equity, and others. Why am I oversimplifying this? The reason for this oversimplification and this tone you will see throughout the presentation is because I want this to be an understanding or a bridge between the technology folks, the product folks, and financial services. I don't want to. This is not an Investopedia. This is not a jargon dump of every financial services which is used. Right. This is just an understanding building. Similarly, in investments, debt, equity, and others, we already know that no market participation, market in the sense the stock market participation, the investment goes into debt. Your fixed deposit savings account also account into debt. Equity is your massive, massive stock market involved investments. You can do a ton of them, and others, real estate, gold, and the art. There are 1,000 of them, right? Again, you have insurance. The way IRDAI defines it as is life, health, and general. Very, very simple. I think it's self-explanatory. Today, what we'll be doing is we'll be spending time on lending. We'll be spending time on investments. Very honestly, I am not the person to, I have worked in InsurTech, but I've worked for like probably a couple of months. There are much better qualified people to deep dive into insurance. And, you should definitely all ping Gaurav and ask him for a session on payments. So having said that, let's start off. Right. You know this. You all of you know this. When you don't know what the business model is, you are the business model, right? If any consumer internet company isn't charging you, undercharging you, basically giving you a discount, or for its product or service, it's scaling to monetize data. It's scaling to monetize your data, right? And what are the two ways which I know which can monetize data? There are just two. You can either do fintech or you can do ads. That's it. I don't know any other way to monetize data. I'm not talking about increasing GMV and stuff like that. I'm talking about actually extracting rupees out of it, actually profit out of it, right? Ads you can use to hyper target customers, and because you know the data to hyper target customers, you get money out of it. Fintech, because you know what are the needs of the customers at which points at which cycle you can provide that need. We'll know more about this in the future slide, but this I think all of you already know about this, right? So let's deep dive, right? Let's deep dive into lending, right? I am going to explain if any of you don't understand even a single acronym here, don't worry, everything will be clearly explained, and I'm going to simplify it to the nth degree, right? So you might, for some of you who already have a lot of financial service experience or domain expertise, you might feel that this is a little bit oversimplified. But again, I'm saying this is a bridge, right? This is a bridge to understand how technology can create a moat, right? So what are we talking about? How does lending earn money? Very self-explanatory. The green is basically all the money which comes in, and the orange is basically all the money which goes out. Very, very clear, right? The first part, which is the most important part, is the yield, right? You can charge a customer 6%. You can charge a customer 40%, right? 6% is generally what is charged for, let's say, a home loan, and there are firms with 40% for payday loans. Obviously, some of you have read about the Chinese stuff. You also know that they charge 300% and so on and so forth, right? But this is basically 80% of where the 80% of where the money comes in. Again, these numbers, the 80, 20, 40, 30, 30, these are all very large estimates, very large generalizations based on my experience, because it varies from between even a bank and NBFC, it varies, and between a bank, NBFC, and fintech, it varies even more. Okay, so just this is something, again, a representation rather than accurate numbers from a P&L. Okay. So yield is one part of it, right? What is the other part of it? Fees. what is the, when you hear about the word fees, right? Where does it strike you? Some of you who already have, like, a flourishing career in product management, in engineering, in business, so on and so forth, I'm sure you already have like those fancy cards with with annual fees, and you're happy to pay it because you're getting more points out of it, right? That is the fee income, right? There are obviously other fees also, which is like processing fees, and like, there is origination fees, and there is so many fees are there which are built in. Or even for that matter, there is prepayment fees and foreclosure fees, and so on and so forth. There is a ton of charges which are built into the entire lending cycle. And when I say lending, I am obviously including cards in it, right? So these are the two primary ways in which a lending firm could be a bank, could be an NBFC, could be a fintech, can earn money, right? And then comes the third part, which is basically the expenses, right? The first expense is something called cost of funds. Okay. What is cost of funds? Cost of funds is basically nothing but when you actually lending it out to someone, where are you getting the money from? You're getting the money from somewhere, right? It's not that you're taking your own money and giving it to the entire world, right? So how do you get that money? You borrow it from someone, right? And this is one of the main places in which you borrow money from, correct? This is one of the majority of expenses of the lender, okay? The interest rate at which you borrow this money is very, very, very critical in the entire lending life cycle. It is cheapest for the banks, then followed by NBFCs, and then followed by fintechs, right? Then after you have borrowed the money, then you have to operate the entire firm, right? There is a lot of things which you need to do in operations, right? But majority, there are three things which you do. Number one is sourcing. You have either massive amount of branches, or you have a huge digital marketing spend to get the right customers, or you have you do like paper advertising, you do tie-ups with different companies, you do a lot of stuff to source, and that's a massive sourcing is basically a marketing sales, right? Massive expenditure goes into that, right? The actual underwriting, which is the team which does the underwriting, plus the logic, research, thought process, systems which go into underwriting, probably is around 10%, but it is very, very critical, and you will see that in the next few slides. And 45% is again collections. What is collections? Boss, once you have paid the money out, you need to go and collect it back. And many of you might already be aware of this, but the entire industry is run on either the phone call or a person visiting. As of right now, the entire industry is run like that. That's a massive cost which is built in, right? Finally, the other expense which is there is the NPA, unpaid dues. Somebody takes a loan from you and says, hey, I'm not going to pay you back, right? This is usually lowest for the large secured loans, home loans and stuff like that have 0.5, 0.3% NPAs. And there are companies which I personally know in fintech which have NPAs ranging from 22 to 25%, right? So that is the gamut, and that is why I'm saying that there is a generalization which I've done right at the top, right? It is very, very critical for us to understand this clearly. And if all of you are super clear about this, then I'll move to the next slide. But if not, I would like to pause and see if there is any questions at all on this particular slide. If you understand this, then the next slides become very, very, very easy. I'll just pause for a second.
Yeah, because no questions so far on this slide, but I'm sure as we progress, we'll have more.
Sure, no problem. Brilliant. We'll keep coming back to that. It's not like a linear presentation. We can keep coming back to this particular slide when required, right? How many folks are we up to now on a Sunday evening? Oh, we have 31 folks. Brilliant. Okay, brilliant. So let's do this, right? 31 folks, and all of you are perfectly clear with this. That's surprising. Brilliant. Okay, let's jump in. So the question is, what models can you apply to basically maximize the money which you are learning? If you are working in a lending firm, or if you want to work in a lending firm, how can you ensure that the money actually goes up, right? Number one, it's very simple, right? Either you can increase these two or you can decrease these three. I mean, it's plain logic, right? But how do you do that? That's the critical thing. And then the next question is, how do you do that with technology, right? So here comes the main aspect of increasing the yield. Yes, you can increase the yield. What is the easiest way to increase the yield? Just charge more percentage, right? Why can't you just charge 40%? Why can't you just charge 60% or 80% or 90%, right? Two things, right? First thing is interest rate has been directly proportional to risk, right? And interest rate is also directly proportional to demand. These are two very, very critical things which need to be understood about interest rate, right? Why am I only limiting these two? I'll explain. But these are the two things which we need to be very, very critical about. So home loan interest rates. Can anybody give me a number? What is the home loan interest rate which we are looking at today? Anybody?
Yeah, we're getting a bunch of responses in chat. 7%, 10%.
7%, right? 7% is like is a very, very average, mean, right? Why is it okay? And what is a credit card, based loan? Do you guys, obviously, at least some of you might have seen the credit card based loan, right? What is that percentage? Any idea?
50%?
No, 30%, 30 odd percent. Okay, brilliant. And do you guys remember taking education loans when you guys went to school, when you guys went to your fancy MBA colleges and your fancy BTech colleges and paid through the nose, right? How much was the interest rate? Do you guys remember? Or is it like, I'm not paying it anyway? Any idea? It was somewhere around 8%. Now the question is, why was your home and education rate interest so low and your credit card interest rate so high? Why? What is the difference? What is causing this difference? The reason is very simple. Home has a collateral. You run away, the home is the banks or the NBFCs, right? If let's say that education loan, right, you are a person of caliber going to a nice place, right, which is a nice college, and that's why you have college-wise tiers. Some colleges, they don't even give a loan. All that stuff is there, right? These two things, and then the third point, which is credit card, right? Credit card is credit card about risk? No. Credit card, even let's say Gaurav or me or anyone for that matter, will get a 33%. Why? The risk is not high. We are not very risky people. We are good people, right? Why is it so high? The reason it is so high is because the demand. Why do you use a credit card based loan? Because you have exhausted everything else. The demand is ridiculously high at that particular point, and you just swipe and you say, we'll think about it later. Correct? Similarly, your education loan and home loan are low because of the fact that the risk is low. This is very, very critical for us to understand. Interest rate directly proportional to risk, interest rate directly proportional to demand. Brilliant, right? So what can technology do here? Technology can't do anything, right? If there is a bunch of low, risk customers, they will keep getting low interest loans. And if there is a high demand situation will keep getting high interest. What can you do about it? Two things, right? In terms of the interest rate versus risk, what is when I say risk, what the hell does it mean? Gaurav is a good person. Casey is a good person. Srikanth is a good person. Anybody else is a good person. What does it mean when it says that you are risky or not risky? Where does this risk come from? It comes from understanding your CIBIL bureau report, your other reports, your income statement, your bank statement, so on and so forth, and saying that, okay, fine, this looks like a stable salaried guy who has, but how many are there? How many salaried professionals are there in this country? How many people have a consistent salary? How many are self-employed? How many are not even employed? How many don't even have digital data? The list, the possibilities just become endless, right? The point is, risk is only defined by what you can measure and read. That is the critical aspect. So if you can figure out through technology a way to unearth uncommon risk indicators, right? And then use those first, unearth the uncommon risk indicators is very critical. What does it mean? Your typing speed on the phone is a risk indicator, right? Whether you access the website in the middle of the night or not is a risk indicator. Whether you live in a certain area, certain pin code, certain apartment complex is a risk indicator. How close is a doctor's house to your home of residence is a risk indicator. The number of flights you take per month is a risk indicator. All of these are risk indicators. All of these can tell you something about the person enough to make a decision whether to give him a loan or not. Right? This is about the first part, which is about unearthing uncommon indicators. And why am I saying all this? This is something which we did in our previous firms, right? But what is the other part? Boss, you have what is an underwriting model? What is an underwriting model which says, ki, boss, give this guy a loan, yes or no? It's a bunch of rules. There is a bunch of 10 rules which says, okay, this guy looks like a salaried guy. He works in a class A company. His salary is more than this much. He has been working in the same company for the last 3 years. He has a family. He is married. Blah blah blah. List of rules. Apply all these rules. He passed 60% of the criteria. Give him a loan. That's it, right? That's the model. But what I just explained to you, for those who know statistics, is nothing but a standard simple equation. Right? It is y is equals to m1x1 plus m2x2 plus m3x3 plus so on and so forth. Now imagine you had an equation which does not depend on fixed m1s, fixed x1s, right? But actually learns in real time what the m1 should be for each x. That is nothing but your machine learning model. I didn't use that word because it's a very, very abused word. But your machine learning model is nothing but, if you give me 4 indicators and somebody else gives me 4 other indicators and somebody else gives me 3 indicators, there is a little bit overlap here. How do I read the risks of all these 3 gentlemen or ladies? And how do I ensure that my model keeps making mistakes but keeps learning, right? That you need to first build the model and then make sure that the model learns fast and becomes more and more and more accurate. That is the key to ensuring risk. And what will happen because of these 2 things? So today, imagine a straight graph, right? I hope I had a whiteboard to do this, but imagine a straight graph, right? What is a graph? The graph basically looks like this, right? If you plot a graph, you have risk here and your return here, right? The graph looks like this. This is like, high risk, high return, low risk, low return. It's as simple as that, right? Now, if you find this curve below, right, which says, hey, even though this guy, according to the traditional risk indicators, he is here, but according to the new risk indicators which I have come out with, he is actually here, right? What can you do? You can offer him a lower interest rate loan than anywhere else. And that is the key. 2 things. You are offering the person an interest which is not available anywhere else, number 1. Number 2, you are offering a loan to a person who is not offered anywhere else. That is what you'll be cracking with this aspect. That is where technology comes in, right? The second part, interest rate is directly proportional to demand. This is a little bit tricky, right? I don't know if you already know this, but if you look at the fintech keywords, right, one of the most highly bid keyword, the costliest keyword, is something called personal loan. Right? Because everybody is looking for personal loan on the net and like saying that, hey, where can I get a personal loan, and so on and so forth. But are these the customers you want to acquire? Answer is no, right? Because these customers have already gone from one personal loan to one credit card to another credit card, so on and so forth. And they're basically in the business of ensuring that they know the banks will never lend them, NBFCs never lend them. They're going from fintech to fintech. But that's a digression. The main aspect which I'm trying to say is that you need to basically be there where the customer needs money. And you need to be so seamless that the customer doesn't even realize. He obviously understands that he has taken a loan, but he doesn't even realize the pain of filling an application and taking the loan. That is what a product manager or a technology folks or and engineering folks and designers can do. You need to kill the chore of actually getting the loan. It should be one click checkout. Hey, you know what? Your bill amount is 99,000, whatever it is. You have a credit of like 3,000 or 7,000 or 20,000 lying here. Just click and this will be applied and you can pay the rest. It's as simple as that. Now, to get there for every single customer for across the entire universe is a very big thing. But that is what you can crack with technology, right? This is the first part of it. Again, I'll pause for a few seconds if there is any questions at all. Otherwise, I'll jump.
Yeah, no questions so far, Casey. But
Brilliant.
folks, if you have any questions, can you just post them on chat?
Can you give me
or on the Q&A?
give one or two examples on demand, Apurv? Okay. So what I mean to say is that so when this entire, I mean the easiest example which I can give you is the Flipkart BNPL, which I have seen personally. But any checkout financing is the standard way in which you can be there where the demand is, right? But more important, I'll give you another non-online example, probably that can give you a little bit of perspective on this, right? So there is a company which I know. I can't name it. It's still in it's still in what do you call it? What do they call it? Stealth mode, right? What it is trying to do is it's a startup, but it's not dependent on tech. So what it does is that it basically gives medical loans, in the sense it gives loans to customers who can't pay their medical bills for whatever reason. Health insurance is very, very underserved in this country, and so on and so forth. So what they have done is they're basically tied up with all these hospitals, and they have their representatives sitting at the billing desk of these hospitals. All they do is they understand who is the customer. The customer walks in, the customer is told the bill amount and so on and so forth. If he expresses any kind of hesitation, any kind of problem, saying that, hey, this is too much, this is not covered, whatever it is, that is when our guy jumps in. This is nothing but the Bajaj Finserv model, which was perfected 12 years ago, but in consumer durables, but the same thing applied for hospitals, right? This guy, now the question which I asked them is, boss, how do you do risk assessment? They said, boss, we only give the loan to people who are admitted, right? And the people who are admitted has to get a release, right, from the hospital, saying that the person that everything is done, right? And when the release is happening, I'm sitting right there. So there is no chances of me not having their address, not having their contact number, not having their even relatives required names for that matter. It's as simple as that, right? So basically, what I'm trying to say is that I know probably I don't know how they will scale, but the point which I'm trying to make is this is a very good example of being there where the demand is, right? Obviously, they don't kill the chore. They basically give you a paper form and they fill it and so on and so forth. But that's another thing which we can do through technology. Is that does that help? Sorry, Apur? Okay, another question from Samir. Samir, which says, how does the model self-learn faster? Can you just hold on to that question? I have an answer to that, and we'll jump to that question a little bit. I love that question. I love that question, and there is an answer to that in the next few slides. Is risk only restricted to risk of non-payment, or there are other risks associated with lending? Oh yeah, there is a ton of risk associated with lending. There is two sides of the risk, right? One is the customer risk, and one is the risk which you're taking as with the reputation of yourself as a banker, as an NBFC, so on and so forth. There's RBI regulations around it. So, for example, if you send gundas to people's home to collect, you're screwed, right? Your entire shop is closed in like the next day, right? At the same time, if you don't check, right, the required regulatory things when giving out a loan, it's your responsibility. You go and give the loan to a guy who wants to, launch a terrorist operation. It's your fault, right? So those risks are also there, but those are more from the organization side. From the customer side, the main risk is the fact that he'll run away without giving you money, right? With multiple lending players having access to similar indicators, that is the whole point which I'm trying to make, right, Gaurav Gulati? You have to find things which are unique to you, unearth uncommon risk indicators. If you go to the same what was those companies? I forgot. Synaptics of the world, or God knows what else. The same companies who do the data mining in SMS, data mining in, boss, they have their thought process, and they are selling that. They're a SaaS company. They are selling their thought process to 1,000 different organizations. How are you unique? How will you create a moat? Yes, good starting point, very good starting point. But you need to have something which is yours truly, right? How do you do that? By continuous experimentation. And that's also the answer to the other question around how can you make the underwriting model learn faster, right? Okay, let me try to answer that right now instead of waiting for the next slide. You need to lose money. To put it in a blunt manner, you need to lose money to learn. Your organization, your CEO, everyone in the organization needs to, from top to down, needs to be okay with the fact that you are going to lose 1%, 2%, 5% of the money which you have lent out because you wanted to learn. That's it. That's the simple answer, right? The reason we used to have something called as an experiment, and we used to have an experiment. Along with the experiment, we used to have a cutoff, in the sense, if let's say that we found there is so we used to have buckets of customers, right? The best of the customers, second best, third best, which we used to give different loans to. And then there is a bottom bucket, which is an experimental bucket, right? Then there is a cutoff saying that, boss, if the total number of customers who are in this bucket reach 5,000, stop. But those 5,000, what they do, learn from it. Because your model basically sees those customers which it has never seen before. If your model doesn't see bad customers, how will the model learn? If you basically feed only the good customers data to it, model will be saying, this customer is good, but it will never be able to say, Baba, don't give to this customer is bad, right? So that is the only way to learn. There is no other way to learn, right? Okay. Now let's jump to the next bit, right? Increase fees. This is a little bit tricky. Okay. How many of you have gone and actually, talk to your Amex people? I'm sure some of you at least have Amex card, saying that, waive off kar do. You can pay it. You can easily pay it. You love the service of Amex also, but you have done it. That's Indian mentality. You can't do anything. I have done it, right? I have done it in the past, right? The reason I'm saying, I'm calling it out, is because unless and until you are really passionate about what USP this particular thing is providing, you will not pay for it. You will not, unless it hits you every day, you will not. I'll give you another example. How many of you subscribe to The Ken, Morning Context, Cap Table, and so on and so forth? Do you subscribe? Some of you at least subscribe? Yeah. Why do you subscribe? You pay money for it. Same thing is coming in Economic Times. Same thing is coming in Mint, except that it is hidden and not in a beautiful language, right? Why are you paying? The reason you're paying is you value it, right? And how many of you are there? 28 on this call, and probably in the entire country, maybe like, I don't know, 1 lakh, 2 lakh, 10 lakh at max. That's it. That's the small mode. That's a small group which is there. So the point which is there is that, boss, if you're creating some fee-based financial service, fee-based lending service, you need to have very clear USPs, and that USP should hit that customer on a daily basis. It should be a toothbrush. It can't be a ek bar, 6 mahine mein use kiya. No, can't be, right? Your great experience is table stakes. Okay? What Cred has built, or what anybody else, where the Cred is a beautiful user experience, right? But what Cred has built is table stakes. It is going to become table stakes very soon, right? USPs are born by convincing the finance and compliance teams. Please, remember this. You can build, create beautiful slides, show it to your boss, show it to your CEO, so on and so forth. That the main people, and very rightly so, the main people whom you need to convince are the finance and compliance team, because they'll ask you 2 questions. One, finance team will ask you, boss, no problem, it won't make money now. Where is the path to making money? Show me that, and show me the logic of that. Don't give me random Excel sheet gap, right? And compliance teams, they know what RBI will come down as. You can fly under the RBI radar till you are big. There is no problem at all. But the moment you are sizable, RBI will come down, right? And when RBI comes down and changes something, and you say, hey, you know what, I want to change my entire business model, it won't work, right? So remember this particular aspect. You need to build USPs, but you need to build USPs by doing these 2 things. And as I said, you'll always have, for a fee-based service, you'll always have a small TG. You need to basically create a wall garden around this TG and then grow your niche, right? This is marketing, customer retention, all those stuff which probably any of you know about already, right? Now, what is the other things which you can do? Reduce the cost of funds. Have you noticed in these slides and this slide, there is a, I put things in blue fonts. The reason I put this in blue fonts is because using technology, you can do some of these things. Unfortunately, my belief, I'll be happy to be corrected if I'm wrong, is that technology has no role to play here. Okay. The reason I'm saying that is because the only way you reduce your cost of fund is if you build trust and scale. You are in the organization, you're in financial services, in fintech for 10 years, 5 years. So people who are lending to you also see that, arey boss, they are a big company, too big to fail. There is enough that we can provide the money. Instead of putting money at 14%, let's give them at 10.5%. All those happen over time, right? As you scale and as you build trust, right? The other way is, boss, your CEO or your CFO or your whoever else it is has a very good friend, has very good, very deep contacts in the financial services industry. And when the entire financial services industry, fintech industry, is going and getting funds at 14, 15, 18%, this guy can go and get it at 10%. That's it. There is no other secret to this. And this is a very critical part of any lending company. So remember to always figure out which one you're doing, right? Because unfortunately, technology doesn't have much of a part in it. Okay. Then this, I think, is, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I will just talk about few things very quickly. Reducing OpEx. I think any technology play in the entire financial services started with this, saying that, boss, paperless karte hain. Let's ensure that everything is digitized. Let's ensure that cost will go down. There will be no telecalling. There nahi hota na. You put a person on the call regardless to assist people to fill the form. That is what you have to kill. When you say go paperless, it does not mean that, boss, you just shift the whole assistance from on-ground sales experience to telecalling experience. It will save few pennies. It won't save actual money, right? If you need actual money, then, boss, ensure that your experience is that good, right? So you need to go paperless. You should not have any IPV. IPV is basically in-person verification. How do you kill IPV? Go back to your risk bit, right? What is IPV? In-person verification is done when I am not sure how risky you are. If I'm sure how risky you are, I don't need to do IPV. Just be sure of how risky you are. No, that'll kill this. No on-field force, no branches. That is where you need to reach, right? It'll take time. It is not going to happen overnight. It is going to take time. Source and demand, I think we already talked about this quite in the first slide also. You need to basically ensure that you pull by USP rather than push through digital marketing. I don't know if you ever, please, try this. Every 15 days, right? Go to Google and put down personal loan, right? And see the ads which come and the ranking of those ads. It changes every 15 days. Okay. So you know how much money is going into bidding for that top 3 spots, top 4 spots. It is ridiculous. And this is happening for the last, I don't know, from the last 3 years, 4 years. There's a ton of money. You can't do that, right? You can't continue doing that for life, right? Okay. Gaurav, sorry. Where do NBFCs?
Sorry, I got unmuted.
No problem. Where do NBFCs usually source funds from? Multiple places. There is I mean, I don't know what exactly. There are consortiums who combine to come together and give you and raise debt money for you, which money which you can lend to other people, kind of a thing. There are, again, nowadays even VCs do it. Okay, nowadays, but in the old days, either banks did it, which was the most common thing. But as of today, even LAs do it. They do it. Lot of people band together to do this. But the money comes at the price, right? The last bit is the OpEx. There's the repayment bit, and the reason I put it here is because you would have, I don't know if you remember, but 45% of the money is being spent on underwriting, collections. What happens on collections? Have any of you ever got a collections call ever? To pay back your money, or forget about pay back your money, to pay back your bills? Have you ever got a call? Do they care? Sorry?
Furlenco does that immediately after bill generation for some reason.
Yeah, right. It's very simple. So I think one of the things which happens is that they treat everybody the same, regardless of how risky you are, how unrisky you are, whether you have a good salary, whether you don't have a good salary. It doesn't matter. They'll treat everybody exactly the same. That is not going to continue. If you want to attract customers by great experiences and then you give them a horrible collection experience, they'll run away, right? Malintent customers, people who have an intent to run away with your money, and insufficient income customers are different. You need to be able to identify them through technology and treat them differently. We had in our one of our previous organizations, what we had done is, to a customer level, what kind of what tone, what wordings, what channel, and what frequency to send the message was customized. That is the level of customization which we built, and that is how you need to go. Because the reason I'm calling this out is because because it is very easy to take a hammer and say everybody is a nail, I'll keep hitting it, right? Instead, if you're able to not spend any money on 70% of your 70% of your delinquent customers and only concentrate all your efforts on the 30%, you can get very high quality manpower to attack those 70%. You need manpower. I'm not saying you don't, but you can get very high quality manpower to attack those 70%. There is a massive difference in between a guy who's paid 35,000 to collect versus a guy who's paid 55,000 to collect. Massive difference, right? So that is important. And flexibility, I think this is going to be the hallmark of everything which we are going to build in lending. Yeah, this whole thing of if you buy, if you pay, if you take in this, then this cycle you need to pay this much cycle ke baad you need to pay. Boss, nahi pata yaar, customer ko nahi pata wo sab. It's Apple has done away with all that stuff in their Apple Pay, right? Because how much you pay depends on how much is left over. Khatam. There is no other complexity there, right? Do I need to understand those kind of complications? Yes, if I double click, but I don't need to understand it on the face of it itself, right? So make it simple for customers to understand how much to repay you, when to repay you, and what happens if X is repaid out of X plus Y. That's it. That's all you need to do, right? The last bit is your NPA, right? I think the big part which we talked about, that is underwriting, model building and all that stuff, that is going to be obviously critical. But there is one more thing which you need to do, okay? I'll take an example here. There's a company which I know, which is actually lending to not to B2C. It actually lends to B2B, right? It's a beautiful company. It has three things in it, right? It has its own NBFC, okay? It has a marketplace, okay, and it has marketplace, and it has its own tie-up with certain banks, okay? So these are three different parts of it. So when I say its own tie-ups with the bank, what I mean is that here the money here they've done a FLDG, in the sense they have basically said that, boss, if there is a first loss default, okay, I'm probably complicating it a bit. Let me try to simplify it. There are only two parts are there. The first part is their own NBFC, they take the risk, they make the decision. Second part of it is marketplace, they just connect the lender and the customer, right? So what they do is, so when a customer comes to them, millions and millions of B2B customers who demand loans, they keep coming to them. What they do is, most of the people go in the second part, that is in the marketplace part, right? But the bottom 5%, which are the worst, and the top 10%, which are the best, go to the NBFC, right? So the cream of the cream, the best people in the entire crowd goes to the NBFC and earns them money. The bottom 5% goes to the NBFC and lets them learn, right? So that their learning can increase, and everybody else keeps going through the NBFC, keeps going through the marketplace, but they get the data of everyone. That is one genius way of doing portfolio management. But when you are building a lending place, you need to do real-time automated portfolio management. What does it mean? I am a risky customer. Gaurav is not a risky customer. You need to be able to identify the Gauravs, identify the Krishnas, and give them all different sized loans with different kind of use cases, different interest rates, different tenures, and control it continuously. That is automated portfolio management, right? I think Mr. Dubey had asked this question about how to learn. As I told you, the only way to learn is lose money to learn. Experiment, but you create experiments, but you have a budget and you have a kill switch. You say that, hey, you know what? This budget is exhausted for this experiment. We are going to kill this particular experiment and we are going to take the learning, right? You will realize that as you go forward again and again and again, your experiments will become less and less costlier and smaller and smaller and smaller, right? So this is basically your way in which you can basically earn more money for the lender, right? So what moats can you build in lending tech? In my humble opinion, again, this is my opinion. Please challenge it. Please, discuss it. Please tell me if I'm wrong. There are only two ways which can build a moat. The first way you can build a moat is saying that, boss, I have the lowest cost of funds. I have the lowest expense, right? I have the lowest cost of funds. I get money at like 7%, 8%. I'm happy. That is one way to crack it. The another way to crack it is that saying that, boss, I have actionable data. I don't have just data. I have actionable data, in the sense I can give a loan basis this particular data. If I am who is I here? I has to be the fintech or the bank or the NBFC, right? Let's talk about the first one. The low cost of funds way of doing things is that you usually have a high size of loan. Why do you have a high size of loan? If you're going to take a low cost of, if you're going to have a low cost of funds, right? Will you give a high interest rate or give a low interest rate? You'll give a low interest rate. Why would you want to give a low interest rate? Because you want to maintain a low NPA. Why would you want to maintain a low NPA? Because you're happy, because your cost of funds is low, right? There is no point of saying that because my cost of funds is so low, I will go and give a interest. I'll go and target that population which has very, very high risk, and then take on all the rest of the problems associated with it. You don't need to. You can say, I have low cost of funds. I will get a high, I will only target customers who have very low risk. I'll give them massive loans, right? I will have a very, very low NPA, and I won't even bother with going and sourcing outside, because these customers are some 20 million of the entire India. I know where they are. Either they are already with my organization, or I know where to get it. I'll have a captive sourcing for them, and I'll have the scale of these many only. I'll not have a scale of millions and millions and millions of loans. Very simple. What am I talking about? Can anybody give me what exactly am I talking about? Any example of any example of what am I talking about? What am I talking about the left side? What comes to your mind when you hear what I talked about on the left side? Anyone? Exactly, Gaurav Gulati, right? Exactly, right? Home loans. Home loan companies are the exact the epitome of this, right? They're basically saying, hey, you know what? I don't want to get into this muck of data underwrite. I'm happy with how I'm doing things, and they're doing an excellent job. They're earning tons and tons of money for their investors, right? So that is why that is one way of doing things. The second way of doing things is actionable data, right? If you have actionable data, what can you do? Remember the first slide which we spoke about. You can understand risk better than anybody else. So you can do two things. You can go to the customer and give them an interest rate which is lower than anywhere else, and you can go to those customers who does not get a loan at all. Okay, that is your moat. And so what are the different characteristics of this? Will it work at like this? So if you're attacking this entire population, right, will it be 10 million? No, you have to attack 550 million people. CIBIL database has somewhere around 250 odd million people, out of which 40 million are the ones who have credit cards. So you understand what you're looking at. If you really want to, actually, utilize this moat, you have to have ridiculously massive scale. You can't, because your margins will be wafer thin. Your margins will not be like this. Here the margins will be huge. Here the margins will be thin, right? You can't go ahead and spend a ridiculous amount of money on sourcing. You have to ensure that you source at demand. What do I mean by this? Because if the guy is going to buy a thing on an online platform, source there. If the guy is going to, order something online, source there. If the guy is going to, buy a movie ticket online, source there. That is where you source. If the guy is trying to, ask someone for the money on his messaging app, source there. You cannot source. You cannot keep sourcing on Google AdWords. That is not going to work, right? And because of the fact that you are anyway experimental, right? Because you are going to continuously figure out new ways of underwriting. You are going to figure out what other data point can I gather so that it can give me some sort of this thing. You'll have to learn continuously. Some of you will make mistakes, you will lose money, and you will learn from it. But because you need to do this and you need to get actionable data, your size of the loan will always be small. You'll not have giving out loans of 50 lakhs and in 1 crore in this particular model at all, right? Can there be other models which are a mixture of these two? Answer is yes. Correct. But these are two clearly differentiated models which are available, right? And what comes to your mind when you think of the second bucket? Any thoughts? Cred, I don't know. I don't know whether they're going to lend or not, and how they're going to lend and all that, and what scale they're going to lend at. So probably not, because I think they are wall gardening them with only again, as I said, 40 million customers. Bajaj Finserv, no, Bajaj Finserv is more of the former only, because Bajaj Finserv is brilliant at actionable data, but it is store bought. It is actually sourcing at the demand, which is store. But they also have ridiculously low cost of funds. They don't take a ridiculous amount of risk. They don't do that continuous learning stuff, and they don't lose money at that. They're more traditional. What else? Anybody else? Pay later, Gaurav Gulati. Okay. Let me try to say this, right. And I'm probably, this is a very controversial opinion, but Google. Honestly, I don't know why GPay is not doing it. I don't know why GPay is building a marketplace out of it and so on and so forth, right? I mean, GPay has this. Maybe the Chinese walls or whatever it is, right? Facebook has this. They can crack it yesterday. I don't know why it is still not cracked, very honestly. Anyways, that is about lending. I think we have already reached 6 o'clock. The next part is about investing. Navi, Dhani, yes. Are Suchak sir, yes, of course. Any books or resources to get started about fintech risk modeling? So there is, I don't know if all of you work in financial services organizations or technology organizations, but there is always someone called as a risk team, right? Most of these guys are from traditional financial services organizations. The simple reason being that risk traditionally has been from those organizations. That is where the school of risk has resided. Again, I'm sorry, but I am not a huge believer in learning purely from text. There are tons of text available for risk this thing, but the more practical aspects of risk modeling have to be learned from these people, right? So go to your risk folks, treat them to a chai, treat them to whatever else you can, and then try to build that relationship with us, because this will not end in one day. It takes 3 years, 2 years to even start understanding how much they understand, because their understanding, their depth of knowledge is insane. So my recommendation would be that. Gaurav, what do we do? Should we jump to the next bit, or should we take a pause and take questions, if any, on the lending bit?
Yeah, I think we can take more questions on the lending bit, and if you want to wrap up the investment bit in 5-10 minutes, that should be okay.
Okay, then let me do this, right? Because investment is a different world in itself. It will take I don't think it'll take 10 minutes. It'll probably take a little more.
Guys, or we can continue. It's okay. I mean, whoever can't continue can probably just access the recording, but you can continue. That should not be an issue at all.
Sure. People, if you have any questions on lending, even after this, I think Gaurav can share my details. You can reach out to me, and in investment tech also, you can probably reach out to me. Let me jump into investing, right? This is something, again, I'm very passionate about. We've worked on it for quite some time, and I think there's a lot of scope here also, right? So how does investing earn money? But before we jump into investing, again, I have divided investing into just, again, as I'm saying, it is very generic, very generalized. I'm keeping it at a very high level. There are 3 types of people who are there in investing. There are AMCs, there are stockbrokers, and the distributors. That's it, right? Everybody can be dumped into these categories. Okay. Your AMCs are basically your asset management companies, your mutual fund companies, right? HDFC mutual fund, your PNB mutual fund. So there are tons of mutual fund companies. All of you, I'm 100% sure, at least for the sake of taxes, have invested. And if you're not, you're doing a very, very bad disservice to your salaries by not investing in mutual funds. But anyway, that point aside, how do AMCs, how do mutual funds earn money, right? There is entry and exit loads, right? The reason this is important to understand is that this money goes only to the AMC. It doesn't go anywhere else. Okay. So when you buy a mutual fund for 100 rupees, a certain portion at the starting is added on top of the 100 rupees to the mutual fund company, and a certain portion you need to pay from your returns when you take out the money. But both of these are gone, right? When I say both of these are gone, what do I mean by that? Entry loads is anyway, SEBI has said, boss, you can't charge entry loads and all that stuff. So that was, till very recently a lucrative way of making money. That is gone. Exit loads is only there on funds where there is a lock-in. If there is a lock-in for 3 years or a lock-in for whatever time, and if you break the lock-in, only at that time exit loads are there. So this honestly does not remain a massive source of revenue anymore. The next bit is important. There is something called total expense ratio. Okay, what is this? This covers your management fees. This covers your fund administration, right? And basically, this, if you put it in very simple words, this is the charge which the AMC is taking to take your money, figure out where to invest. What does AMC do? It basically invests into the stock market, right? To figure out where to invest in and constantly watch it like a hawk and rebalance the portfolio every 3 months, every 6 months continuously, right? But again, there is a regulation which says you cannot charge, AMCs can't charge more than 1.75, somewhere between 1.75 to 2.5%, maximum 2.5% of the AUM can be charged by the companies. That's it. Nobody can charge more than that. Okay. So I don't know how many of you are thinking, "Arey yaar, isme to paisa hi nahi hai." But hey, we'll come to that, right? And what are your expenses? People and infra cost. Very simple, right? People, technology, all those costs are your basic research costs, and all that stuff is your people and infra cost. Your management fee and your fund administration also are costs, but you're taking 2.5% for it. Obviously, you won't spend 2.5% if you have scale. So that goes into your plus, your people and infra cost. That's why I called it out as a separately as a minus, right? Then you have your stockbrokers. And stockbrokers, the moment I say the word stockbrokers, everybody thinks there is only one, which is Zerodha, right? But anyway, there are tons and tons of stockbrokers in this country. And how do they earn money? Brokerage. What is brokerage? Every time you do a trade saying that, hey, this much, I want to buy a stock of HUL, right? The transaction is going through the broker to the exchange. Then from the exchange, he is procuring these stocks of HUL, sending it back to broker, who sends it back to you. This entire transaction is basically your buy transaction. For this, there is an amount which the brokerage pays to the exchange and you pay to the brokerage. This is 80% of the broker's earnings, right? And then there is something called fees. There are other products which, so how many of, I don't know how many of you are prevalent about the stock market, but you have your regular stocks which you buy and hold for 1 year, 2 year kind of things. You have intraday, which you buy and sell on the same day. Then you have a little more complex stuff like options and futures, which again you buy, but basically it's not a stock which you're buying, but you are basically betting on the price of a stock, right? To put it in a very loose manner. But those which you buy, but all of these are related to brokerage. But the fees products are basically not related to brokerage. They are basically saying, hey, you know what? We will manage your stock exposure through these products, a structured product, a PMS, so on and so forth. A PMS is a portfolio management service, and we'll charge you this much fees for it. Okay. Then you have your people costs and your technology costs, which is pretty standard, right? Distributors, on the other hand, fall into another bucket, who basically take all these products and give it to the customers. Very simple, right? Basically, they are the channel between, they are the medium in between the manufacturers, which are the AMCs, right, and the customers, right? Commission comes from, and this is a massive universe of customer. 95%, more than 95% of the entire mutual fund business happens through distributors, right? Commission from manufacturers is 95% of the amount of their revenues. Advisory fee is 5%, and obviously they have the people cost. I'll ask one question, and probably you can help me answer it. How many of you have been approached by wealth managers? I'm sure at least some of you have been approached by wealth manager. Okay, 1, 2. Okay, brilliant. So you guys know what a wealth manager does, right? He will basically come and tell you, hey guys, you know what? You have a ton of money. You're getting paid, 10 lakhs a month. Why don't I come and manage your money for you, right? That's a wealth manager. even he or she falls in this bucket itself, right? So basically anybody who advises you on your money, I have clubbed them into this particular bucket. Okay. Now, just a small tidbit. I don't know how many of you know this, but there are something called index funds. Okay. Now, what is index funds? Index funds is basically there is something called as a stock index, the top 50. The stock market is composed of the stock market ka price which you see every day. What is that price? That price is nothing but a composite of 50 companies ka price. 50 companies. How are they chosen? They're chosen every year based on the historical performance, based on their stability, so on and so forth, to reflect India's stock market performance. Right? It's a big honor to have. Right? Index funds are basically these funds. You just invest in the stock market in the same proportions which the index is investing in. Index is created in. Right? And index funds have outperformed majority of the managed funds, especially large cap funds over the shorter time horizons, over 1 to 3 year horizons. I'll tell you why this is important in the future slides. Right? So how can investing make money? Very simple stuff. You must have, remember I asked you one question, you must be wondering, boss, at this wafer thin margins, 2.25%, 1.75%, how the hell do they make money? The answer is scale. You cannot go into the investech business without hoping for a scale. You cannot, because you can, but not in the traditional AUM, traditional NBFC, traditional mutual fund business or traditional stockbroking business. If you look at your stockbroking business, your higher AUM means because your cost of giving the expense ratio are fixed. The research which you do is fixed. The fund management which you do is fixed. The fund manager you are paying is fixed. But if more and more people come into the fund, you can afford to give a lower expense ratio, which means you can attract more customers. And you can also get a trail commission. What does this mean? If you are, this is more for a distributor, right? If you are looking at how a distributor earns money, there is an upfront commission, which basically says, I have sold this guy a mutual fund of 5,000 rupees. Give me 5 rupees. 5 rupees is a very bad example. 1 rupee or even less, right? That is your upfront commission. The other thing is, because this customer is remaining with mutual fund for the next 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, the distributor will keep getting money every year. That's called trail commission. If you have a higher AUM and if you have customers who retain with you for quite some time, you can keep getting higher trail. This is very important, right? There is a company called NJ Mutual Funds. Back in 1990s, early 1990s, it started selling only one thing and one thing, which is basically it said, I am going to sell SIPs. I believe that SIPs is the best vehicle to make money for salaried class, people who have low salaries, people who have small salaries. It started going only in one direction. That's it. They did nothing else. Okay. There is even a record of many records, in fact, of their office boys who were office boys in 1990. Today are the biggest distributors for the largest AMCs in this country. Right? More than 300-400 crores of business goes through NJ mutual funds. That is their power as of today, and they hold huge sway over the market. Right? How did they do this? Because of the simple fact that they keep getting trail. All these 20 years of trail keeps getting accumulated. Right? Similarly, for your stock market, it's the same thing. You have humongous volumes with you. You can afford to give lower brokerage. It's a very different aspect that Zerodha started with a lower brokerage and then achieved the higher trade volume. But it did that, right? It did that. So that is very, very important for us to understand. And how can technology help in this particular regard? You have to make investing as autopilot. Nobody, and this is again a customer research which comes out, and I'm sure you guys can do your own customer research and figure this out. But if you ask customers, do you want to manage your investment? They'll say no. As long as I'm getting safe returns, as long as somebody is guiding me on my returns, I don't care. I just want to sign documents, and this is a headache. It's not an enjoyable activity for most of the customers. So if you provide transparency, if you provide hand-holding, and if you ensure that everything is running on autopilot, you will achieve that higher AUM, you will achieve that higher trade volume. That is exactly what Kite has done. That is exactly what Zerodha has done. That is exactly what Smallcase is trying to do through some form of a hybrid between equity and mutual funds. Right? This is about the scale. The other aspect, remember the two things which we talked about. We talked about fees-based income and the total income in terms of fund management or brokerage and so on and so forth. You need to increase the fee-based income. Why do you need to increase the fee-based income? You need to increase the fee-based income because once you start charging the fees, you are charging for the advice you give and not for the transactions which happen, and not for the volume and not for any of those things. You will get that. But what you're basically charging for is your expertise, your moat. Okay. To give you a simple, parallel to this, right? If I am only going to imagine an e-commerce scenario. If I'm only going to sell which is there on every other platform, yes, I'll get sales, I'll get some margins out of it, so on and so forth. But the real money comes from what? Or even you take any supermarket chain, right? Where does the real money come from? Where does the real money, actual money comes from? The supermarkets run at like 2%, 1% kind of margins. If they are selling Godrej products, HUL products, so on and so forth. Where do they actually mint money? They mint money in their own products. And what is their own products? Simple packaging dal and stamping their stamp on it. That is their own products. They get 40% margins there, right? So when you are basically selling your own products, that is where you actually make the good money, and that is fee-based revenue. Okay. So what can you do from a technology perspective? You can own the customer investments for life. You need to grow with the customer. You need to have unique product constructs. I don't know how many of you have already seen Smallcase, but it's a very beautiful construct. What it says is, nobody understands mutual fund, large cap, small cap, multi cap, this cap, that. Nobody understands that. But they understand themes. They understand that a good theme is demonetization. They understand that a good theme is defense. They believe that a good theme is environment. Right? These are themes. People have their ideas about these themes because they're reading news, reading newspapers, so on and so forth. Right? And they said, why don't we make people invest in these themes instead of actually centering around these large cap, mid caps, and so on and so forth. And they make the user experience beautiful, gave the handholding to the customer, ensured that new customers can be onboarded, so on and so forth, and now they're growing. Right? Unique fee structuring. If you look at any fee structure which is there especially in wealth management, it is brutal in the sense it is like, "Arey boss, total AUM aapka jitna hai, us pe I'll charge 2%. Arey, it doesn't work like that. What are you charging him for, right? That the customer should be happy about, right? Otherwise, he will just go bargain shopping. Aap 2% de rahe ho, aap 1.57% de rahe ho, aap 2.5% de rahe ho. No. You go and tell him, boss, you're investing in fixed deposits. I don't need to take 1 paisa from you, right? I'll just go and invest. I'll just go and invest on your behalf. That's the service I'm providing. But if you're investing in private equity, because it's such an important thing, or if you're investing in real estate because it's such a thing which needs expertise, you need to pay me. Then the customer is also paying you for your expertise, and he understands that you are charging for the expertise and not for investing in fixed deposits, right? So that is very, very important, and you need to grow with the customer. Today, you are starting him with SIP in a large cap fund. 20 years down the line, you will have the same customer investing in art, but you have to take that journey with him. You can't lose the customer in between. That is the game of Investec. That is where you need to actually put your best foot forward, because if you don't even attempt to do that, and if you say I'm only target this particular thing, you're never going to create that scale and money for yourselves, right? So again, the last part is more about the advice bit. I have said this multiple times. People don't pay for advice. People don't pay for USPs, right? That's how the country is. That's how the mentality is as of right now, right? But if you build trust, if you build the Ken type of content, if you build the Ken type of understanding among a large population, they will come to you, right? You need to find the niche and get that paying niche to grow. For example, there is one company which I know, which only and only targets NRIs who are returning home back to India. That's it. It manages their investments. their US taxation, their India taxation, their US, their Indian, their Indian investments, their US investment, the real estate, everything is managed by this one company. And they only charge advisory. They don't charge anything in terms of, transaction fees and all that stuff. And that is why this particular bit is important. Don't look at it as investments. Look at it as money. The customer is coming to you with his money. He is not coming only with investment. So if you are going to do investments, I'm not saying build an expense management app, but I'm saying, boss, that is also something which you need to consider. That aspect of money also you need to consider, right? Because what is the point of investing if not for enjoying the money which he gets out of it? The other part is about reducing costs. Again, this is very, very standard. I don't think we need to jump a little deeper into that. I'll just jump on two specific points. If you are anyway going to reduce your ops cost and all that stuff by doing the digitalization, paperless, all that stuff which we already talked about. But what is the main component of the cost as far as distribution companies or wealth management companies or any of these companies are concerned? It is people. And why is it so? Even the smartest of the people, even the shrewdest of the people, even the most educated people will say, send someone, I want to talk to him or her, then I will sign. Why is that required? Do you think he's lazy? Do you think the customer is lazy? Do you think the customer is like used to chauffeur-driven cars and stuff like that? Maybe, yes. At a certain extent, yes. But if you make a ridiculously simple flow and you just tell him, sir, click here, you're done, right? Will he not do that? Yes, he will actually avoid an appointment. Then why does he want you at his doorstep? Why does he want you to sit in front of him? I need a neck to catch if something goes wrong. That is what is going on in the head. And if you can solve that by ensuring that the trust, transparency, and all those are provided in the advisory itself, you will solve the whole thought process of sending a person to his home, right? And the other part is, if, again, you need to ensure what are you sending him home for. Private equity, please do send a person home. It is going to take 3 sessions of discussions to even finalize where a 20 crore investment need to go. No question about it. Investing in fixed deposit, don't. Your wealth management expertise is wasted on a guy who just wants to invest a fixed deposit. The same guy can have a portfolio of 100 crores, but don't do that, right? That is very, very critical, and that needs a change in the way we run that industry through technology, right? Technology costs, you have ridiculously wafer thin margins anyway. You can't go and have like the pay tons of money to all these but MS of the world and so on and so forth of the world, so that you can spend a lot of money on them. No, you need to depend on open source infra to build whatever you can, because of the fact that your margin is your entire industry is a low margin business. And expose your APIs. This is one thing which Zerodha has done, which I love, is that, boss, just give out your APIs and let the innovation happen everywhere else. You need to ensure that the transaction is flowing through you. That's it, right? But the innovation of the products can happen anywhere. Let it happen. You're not going to lose anything. You keep doing your innovation, right? But you need to expose your API. That's a little bit about investing, and I hope that you guys got a little bit of glimpse onto investing. I spent a little bit of time on lending, a little bit of time on investing, but my my entire focus, or the reason I wanted to do this is because next time some of your product managers, some of your technology folks, some of your business folks, so on and so forth, you walk back into your financial services or fintech organizations and you're asked to do X, you know why you're being asked to do X. Or even better, you can suggest a why, which can ensure that your business models are working and your moats are created. That was my overall objective, and I'm happy if there is any particular, if even a couple of you can succeed on that. Nothing like that, right? Okay. What points need to be kept in mind for product to be launched where there is no working models available? Okay, I didn't understand this question, Sandeep. Probably I can take it a little bit. You can probably explain it a little bit more.
Yeah, I think Sandeep is top now.
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, we can. Any other questions that you folks had, we can take them right now and then.
It's cool. You guys know where you can reach me on LinkedIn and stuff like that. Just ping at any point of time if you have any questions. I'll be more than happy to help. And Gaurav is obviously there to to reach out in case you need other help with probably other topics and stuff like that, which Gaurav can arrange. Yeah.
Krishna, firstly, would like to thank you for taking out the time for this. I
Anytime.
know this is very rich, dense content in such a short span of time. Really, really appreciate you, taking out the time for creating this for us, and for delivering this very beautiful session today. It's been very helpful personally for me, and I've been getting messages from the folks who had joined saying that it's been immensely helpful for them as well.
Sure.
So thank you so much for taking out the time. We'll be putting this up on our YouTube channel in a couple of days' time. After the editing and so on.
Sure.
And yeah, I mean, but yeah, last chance. Anyone has any other questions that they want to put up here? We'll wait 10 seconds and then move.
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, I would also like to mention that while the session was going on, India inched closer to another medal on Olympics and won another medal at the Olympics, and that's probably why a good portion of our registrations did not, probably
That's
end up
fine.
joining. But yeah, this recording is going to be put up there and available for everyone else to use.
Sure. Take care. Thanks.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you everyone.
Yep.
Really appreciate Krishna and everyone else. You've been a great audience, and thanks so much for joining.
Yep. Take care.
Take care, Casey. Bye.
Bye.